You're about to see me gamble thousands of dollars in a massive blackjack session. The casinos think that I'm a high roller, but what they don't realize is that I'm counting cards and I'm beating them at their own game. In this video, I'll take you through 2 sessions, one of which is an absolute monster, where I fired some massive bets, more bets than I ever have in my entire career. Anyways, enjoy the video. It's my second day on a card counting road trip up the West Coast, and I just arrived at my first playable shop of the day. This casino had a pretty good double deck game, so I'd be betting up to 2 spots of $1,000. I sat down and played through some negative counts before the count started rising at the very end of the shoe. I put out 2 spots of $425 and was dealt a 20 and an 18 against the dealer 7. I stood on both hands and the dealer flipped a 9 and drew to 26 for our first high count win. Sadly for me though, the dealer shuffled right after this hand. So in the next shoe, I played through some negatives before the count rose and I put out 2 bets of $125. I was dealt an 18 and 11 against the dealer 6. Following basic strategy, I stood on the 18 and doubled down my 11. The dealer flipped 3 for 9, then drew an ace for 20. I had a 10 under, so my double down won, but the other hand lost. The count had gone up, so I raised my bets to $200 each, and the dealer was showing a 6. I was dealt a 12, which I stood on, and another 11, which I, of course, doubled down on. The dealer flipped an ace and drew a second ace for 18. Luckily, I pulled a face card on the double down for 21, but the other hand, again, lost. The count stayed the same, but I added a green chip to each bet. I was dealt a soft 16 against a 10, and I hit to make 19 and stood. My other hand was a 13, which I hit and quickly bust. The dealer's 5 also ended up busting, so this round was a push. I put out 2 spots of $500 as the count was now a true 4. The dealer was showing a 9 and we looked down at a 10, which basic strategy said I had to double down. Our other hand was a 17, which we stood on. The dealer flipped a face card for 19, so our 17 lost, but for the 3rd time in a row, we won our double down with a face card. The count had dropped a bit, so I lowered my bet to 2 hands of $325. The dealer had a 5 up, and I doubled my soft 15. My second hand was a 16, which I stood on, and the dealer flipped a face card for 15, but drew to 17. Of course, my 16 lost, but I pulled a 2 on my double for a lucky push. After that hand, the count went back up, so I raised my bets again. 2 hands of $500. And yes, I promise later in the session, you will see 2 by $1,000 hands. But for now, the dealer was showing a face card while we looked down at our 18, which we stood on. Our other hand was a 13, which we hit for 20. The dealer flipped a 6, then drew to 24, meaning we won both our $500 hands. In the next shoe, I played through some negatives until the count rose 2 spots of $225, and the dealer was showing a face card. Our first hand was a 16. Basic strategy says to hit, but I use deviations to make more accurate plays depending on the count. In this case, 16 against a 10 at any positive count is a stand. This is actually the second most valuable deviation behind insurance because of how frequently it comes up. My other hand was a 17, which I stood on. The dealer flipped a 2 and drew to 21, so unfortunately for me, we lost both our hands. The count was now a true 3 and we bet 2 hands of $300. The dealer was showing an 8 and I was holding a 12. I hit to make 21 and took a glance at my other hand. I drew to 22 and bust before the dealer flipped the face card for an overall push. I kept the same bets out and the dealer had a 3 up. Our first hand was a 20, which we stood on, and our second hand was a 12. At the start of the round, the count was high enough to deviate from basic strategy and stand, but as the cards got dealt, the count went down and I resorted to basic strategy and hit. Unfortunately, I drew to 22 and the dealer drew to 19 for an overall push. I played through some more negatives until I reached a true 1, which called for 2 hands of $100. I was dealt an 18 and a 20 against a 2, and I stood on both. The dealer drew to 20, so we pushed 1 hand and lost the other. Some more minimum bets went by and the count went back up to a true 3, and the dealer was showing a 6. I was dealt 2 13s and stood on both, and the dealer took a bust card, so we won. Not only did we win, the count skyrocketed. It was now true 5, so it was time to unleash our maximum bet. 2 hands of $1,000. The dealer was showing a 2 and we were holding onto a soft 13. I hit and drew a 7 to make 20 before standing. Our other hand was a 20, which we also stood on. Each worth $1,000, the dealer flipped a 4 for 6 and then drew an ace for a soft 17, then an 8 for hard 15, and finally a deuce for 17. There was now $2,000 coming our way. The count was still beyond a true 5, so we left our 2 bets of $1,000 out. The dealer had a face card showing, and I was dealt a soft 15, which I hit to make 12, and hit again, and bust. My other hand was a 15, which wasn't any better. Basic strategy says to hit, but I deviated, standing on a true 4 or higher. The dealer flipped a 9 for 19, and we lost that hand too. So I tried again and fired another 2 spots of $1,000. But again, the dealer was showing a face card. While I needed something good, I was slapped in the face with another 15. Using the same deviation as last time, I stood and I checked my other hand. It was a 17, which we stood on, and now our only hope was that the dealer would bust. He flipped a 10, shattering this hope, crushing both of our hands and taking away our $2,000. I really wanted to bet again, but the dealer picked up the cut card and began to shuffle, meaning we would have to go back down to our minimum bet. A couple bets later came a true 2, and we bet 2 hands of $200. The dealer had a 7 up and I was dealt a 10. I doubled down and I hit my other hand to make 19. The dealer flipped an ace for 18, but we pulled a 2 on our double down, so we lost that hand. Another 2 hands of $200 out, and the dealer had a 4. My first hand was a blackjack. Finally, I laid it out and took a peek at my second hand, which was a 9. I doubled down and the dealer drew to 18. And as it turned out, we had a 4 on our double, so we lost that hand. On the bright side, the count shot up and it was time to buy in again. 2 hands of $1,000 and the dealer was showing a 5. I took a single look at my first hand and was really excited for what I was about to do. There's a saying in blackjack. If you split 10s, you're either a card counter or a complete idiot. In this case, I hope I'm not the idiot. To do this, I had to buy in for another $1,000, which I then placed next to my original bet. Our first split was a 17, so we stood. And the second hand, okay, we bought in for another $1,000. I mean, what choice do I have? I slid that bad boy next to my original bet and I split again for a 12, which I stood on. My other hand, I drew an ace. It would have been hilarious to double down a soft 21, but I stood. I looked at my other hand and stood on the 17. There was now $4,000 on the table. In the end, the dealer flipped an ace for a soft 16 and then a 6 for a hard 12, followed by a 5 for a 17 stand, which meant that I won one hand, lost another, and pushed the other 2. All of it ended up canceling out for an anticlimactic push. As disappointing as it was to not win this hand, I've lost rounds just like this. As you could have guessed, very shortly after, I was approached by a couple security guards.
All right, friends, we just got the trespass. Also, gorgeous sunset.
Now it was time to head over to our next casino where I would have a monster session. Considering how my last session went, I was pretty worried when I arrived at the next casino. I didn't know if I'd been flyed or not, but there was only one way to find out. This casino had a slightly worse double deck game than the last one, but it was definitely still worth playing. So I found a free table in the high limit room and I sat down. Near the end of my first shoe, I caught myself a positive count and raised my bet to $100. I wasn't spreading to 2 hands this time around because I was playing heads up. The dealer dealt me a 14 and themselves a 5. I tucked my cards and it was a pretty clean dealer bust for an easy $100. The count dropped but bounced back up once we had another true 1. This time I got a pair of aces against a 6. Basic strategy says to always split aces, so we did. 1 card only and no resplits, so the dealer dealt them face down. They flipped a 10 and bust their hand, meaning we won both $100 bets blind. Again, the count dropped and wouldn't go back up until the next shoe, where the count rose past a true 1. I checked my hand and threw down a blackjack. Never hurts to make an extra $50, but the count dropped after this hand. A few hands later, the count was back in the positives and the dealer was showing an ace against our 19. We always take insurance at a true 3 or higher. Insurance is the #1 most valuable deviation, so I always take an extra moment to think about whether or not I should take it. In this case, the count was not high enough, so we stood. Unfortunately, the dealer flipped a 9 and beat us by 1. 3 hands later and we were back at a true 1 and the dealer was showing a 10. We checked our 19, which we always stand on, and once again, the dealer beat our 19 by 1. A couple of rounds later, we were back at a true 1, and we got a 12 against the dealer's 2. While this is typically a hit, the gambler in me just knew that the next card was definitely a 10. Just kidding. He told me to use a count-based deviation where you stand at a true 3. The dealer flipped over a 6, and a 2, and a 6, and then another 6 for 22. Look at all of those low cards. The count jumped all the way up to a true 7, which meant it was time to unleash our maximum bet. I bought in and put out $1,050. The $50 because I had 2 extra green chips and I wanted this to look like an all-in moment. The dealer was showing a 9.
This was a pretty good hand, so we stood. But the dealer actually ended up pushing with us with an ace.
Frustrating as this was, at least I wouldn't have to worry about buying in for a while, because don't you just love it when the dealer shuffles? Halfway through the next shoe, the count rose, calling for a $400 bet. The dealer showed an ace, and to reiterate, I always ask myself, can I take insurance? In this case, it was close, but not quite. I stood on my soft 20, and the dealer flipped a 7, profiting us $400. I kept the same bet out for the next hand and was blessed with a 15 against the dealer's 8. I hit and bust, and there went $400. I put out another $400 bet and was given a 20 against the dealer's 10. This was a stand, and sadly, it was also a push. The dealer shuffled, but let me tell you, things get really crazy for the next few shoes. For now, the count was still a true 1, and I had a soft 18 against the dealer's 3. I doubled this without hesitation and watched as the dealer drew to 17. The dealer flipped over my double down, which thankfully was a face card. $100 back out on the table, and I pulled an 18, which ended up pushing against the dealer's 3. No worries, we increased our bet to $200 at a true 2. We were dealt a 15 against a 5. We stood, and the dealer drew to 15. Greg special. Okay, next hand. The count rose tremendously after the hand, which called for a $600 bet. I only had $575 left in my stack. I bet $25 less than I should have, and was given a 9 against the dealer's 7. This hand is typically just a hit, but as you know, at a high count like this hand is a double. So I ended up having to buy in anyway. The dealer flipped a 10 for 17. The dealer flipped my card, and oh my god, it was a 3. I didn't want to win that hand anyway. True 5, $800 bet. We got a pair of 2s against the dealer's 4. I bought him for more and pushed forward another $800 to split the 2s. I was dealt a 7 on the first, and I had to double this. So I bought in again and pushed forward another $800 to double down. My next hand drew a 7, so I hit and stood on a soft 18. $2,400 was on the table, and I was in a pretty decent situation. The dealer drew an 8 to make 12. All we needed was for the dealer to draw a 10 to win this hand. The dealer pulled a face card for 22, and just like that, we were being paid $2,400 in blacks. It's funny, because in this clip, the dealer sounded way more excited than I did. But I didn't have any time to celebrate, because it was time to unleash the maximum bet. I counted out $1,000 and gently placed it into the betting circle. The dealer gave me a 10 against theirs, and you may think that this move is awfully risky, but the count called for a double down. We got our card face down, and the dealer flipped an 8 for 18. $2,000 on the table, and this was it. We needed anything better than an 8, and the dealer revealed our double down. He flipped over a 10.
That's one of them. That's one of them.
For a massive $2,000 win. That was nasty, but it's not over. The count was still high, so we had to bet our max again. But this time, I wasn't so lucky. 15 against the dealer's 10. This hand is a stand at a true 4, but it was no use. The dealer will usually win in this situation, and this case is an example of that. Whatever, I was still up, and the count was in orbit. $1,000 out, and we got a pair of aces against their 7. Of course, I split, face down, and the dealer drew to 17.
The dealer flipped a face card on our first ace for 21 and pushed on our second ace.
Another $1,000 win, and another $1,000 out. We drew an unlucky hand of 13 against the dealer's 10. As much as I hate hitting this hand, when I hit it this time around, I drew to 18. But this was still a losing situation. I tucked the cards and closed my eyes. When I opened them, the dealer had a 17 in front of them. He was paying me out. This shoe was a gift that kept on giving. I put another $1,000 out. The dealer was showing a 10. Again, I quickly turned my 8 into a 15 and stood using the same deviation that you saw earlier. But no, the dealer had me with their 20. After all of those insane hands, somehow the shoe was not yet over. There was one hand left. The dealer dealt the cards, and I was happy to be holding a 20 against the dealer's 2. The dealer flipped a 12, then drew a 4 for 16. And this was it. The next card was a queen, which bust their hand. This was a very satisfying end to such a godly shoe. As sad as it was to watch my bets return to $50, just know that this wouldn't be the last time I would be betting $1,000 this session. Halfway through the next shoe, the count rose to a true 1. So we bet $100 and doubled our soft 17 against the dealer's 3. Unfortunately, this double down didn't work out, and the dealer beat our 12 with a 4-card 19. With all of those low cards out, the count was now a true 4. We put out $600 and were given a 19 against the dealer's 10, to which we stood.
The dealer flipped a 6 behind the chip stack and drew an ace to make 17.
We collected our $600 payout and reduced our bet to $400. This time, we got a 12 against the dealer's 2. At a true 3, this hand is a stand. The dealer flipped a 10, 14, and then bust. We upped our bet with the count and put out $600. The dealer was showing a 2 against our 13. We tucked our cards and the dealer flipped over a 10 and then another 10 for 22 bust. We kept collecting our winnings and kept the bets rolling. Another $600 bet followed by a $600 double down on our 10 against the dealer's 2. The dealer drew to 17 and I was pretty disappointed when the dealer revealed my face down card to be a 2. Tough loss, but now the count was in max bet territory. We put those chips in the betting circle and we waited patiently as the dealer dealt us our hand. The dealer showed a 2, and as I checked my hand, I was thrilled to see a 20. I tucked my cards, expecting another easy win, but my expectations were shattered when the dealer flipped an 8, followed by a 10, and now my easy win was a disappointing push. I wasn't entirely disappointed though, because the count was still up. Again, I pulled a 20, but this time against the dealer's 9. This is actually a better situation than the 20 against the 2, because the dealer will often stand after flipping their whole card. In this case, the dealer flipped a 10 for 19, winning us another $1,000. At this point, I was drowning in black and yellow chips and was getting a ton of heat from the pit boss, but I couldn't call it because I was over the CTR threshold of $10,000. This meant that if I went to cash out, I would legally have to hand over my ID anyway, and so because of that, I just kept playing to generate some more EV before my inevitable back off. My goal was to absolutely ravage this casino for all it was worth. Another $1,000 bet. The dealer dealt me a 7 into their 5, which I hit to make 12 and stood. Now the only way we could win was if the dealer bust. The dealer flipped a 9, putting them at a 14, but the dealer sealed the deal when they drew a 3, meaning they would stand on their 17, beating our 15. We were getting very close to the end of the shoe, so knowing this would be my last $1,000 bet I'd put out, I hoped for a favorable hand. Instead, I got a 17 against the dealer's 10. This was a pretty bad hand, but I had no option other than to stand. The dealer flipped over their whole card, and I was very pleased to see a 6. But then, the dealer pulled an 8 that sealed the dealer's fate. Oh, a little rhyme scheming for you. The dealer busted the 24, but soon after this $1,000 win, I was escorted by security to the cage where they gave me a very friendly trespass. I cashed out for a session profit of $7,000. Second trespass of the day, of the trip, and of my life. I played one more short session, which I won't include in this video, before heading back to my hotel for the night. I counted the cash and locked in a total win of $8,945. I will see you guys in the next one.